जय हरा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना। यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना। यमुनातीरा वनचारी। यमुनातीरा वनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। जय गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी। यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना। यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जना। यमुनातीरा वनचारी। यमुनातीरा वनचारी। यमुनातीरा वनचारी। यमुनातीरा वनचारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी। जय श्री श्री राधा माधव की जय। श्री जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा माई की निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे।
बड़े बच्चे तो ऊपर चले गए। टाइम लिखा नहीं है। लिखा नहीं है लेकिन I think 60.
So we welcome all devotees today to read from chapter 9, text 24. This is the last verse in the Bhagavad Gita chapter 9. It's a very nice verse, a very important verse. So let us read it, and hopefully we can learn something from the nice purport that Srila Prabhupada has given us. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Manmana bhava madbhakto
Manmana bhava madbhakto
Madhyaji mam namaskuru
Madhyaji mam namaskuru
Mame vaishyasi yuktaivam
Mame vaishyasi yuktaivam
Atmanam matparayana
Atmanam matparayana
Manmana bhava madbhakto
Manmana bhava madbhakto
Madhyaji mam namaskuru
Madhyaji mam namaskuru
Mame vaishyasi yuktaivam
Mame vaishyasi yuktaivam
Atmanam matparayana
Atmanam matparayana
Manmana bhava madbhakto
Manmana bhava madbhakto
Madhyaji mam namaskuru
Madhyaji mam namaskuru
Mame vaishyasi yuktaivam
Mame vaishyasi yuktaivam
Atmanam matparayana
Atmanam matparayana
Prabhuji's
Manmana bhava madbhakto Madhyaji mam namaskuru Mame vaishyasi yuktaivam Atmanam matparayana
Manmana bhava madbhakto
Manmana bhava madbhakto
Madhyaji mam namaskuru
Madhyaji mam namaskuru
Mam evashyasi yuktevam
Mame vaishyasi yuktaivam
Atmanam matparayana
Atmanam matparayana Mataji's
Manmana bhava madbhakto
Madhyaji mam namaskuru Mame vaishyasi yuktaivam Atmanam matparayana
Manmana bhava madbhakto
Manmana bhava madbhakto
Madhyaji mam namaskuru
Madhyaji mam namaskuru
Mame vaishyasi yuktaivam
Mame vaishyasi yuktaivam
Atmanam matparayana
Atmanam matparayana Matmana Always thinking of me Bhava Become Mat My Bhaktaha Devotee Mat My Yaji Worshipper Mam Unto me Namaskuru Offer obeisances Mam unto me Eva Completely Eshyasi You will come Yuktva Being absorbed Eva Thus Atmanam Your soul Matparayanaha Devoted to me. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki. Please repeat the translation. Engage your mind, always, in thinking of me. Become my devotee. Offer obeisances to me. And worship me. being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. Let's repeat it again. Engage your mind, always in thinking of me. Become my devotee. Offer obeisances to me. And worship me. Being completely absorbed in me, surely you will come to me. Let us hear this wonderful purport of Prabhupada ki. In this verse, it is clearly indicated that Krishna consciousness is the only means of being delivered from the clutches of this contaminated material world. Sometimes unscrupulous commentators distort the meaning of what is clearly stated here, that all devotional service should be offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna. Unfortunately, unscrupulous commentators divert the mind of the reader to that which is not at all feasible. Such commentators do not know that there is no difference between Krishna's mind and Krishna. Krishna is not an ordinary human being. He is the absolute truth. His body, his mind, and he himself are one and absolute. It is stated in the Kurma Purana, as it is quoted by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami in his Anubhashya comments on Chaitanya Charitamrita, 5th chapter, Adi Lila, verses 41 to 48. Deha Dehi Vivedo Ayam Neshware Vidyate Koche. This means that there is no difference in Krishna, the Supreme Lord, between himself and his body. But because the commentators do not know the science of Krishna, they hide Krishna and divide his personality from his mind or from his body. Although this is sheer ignorance of the science of Krishna, some men make profit out of misleading people. There are some who are demonic. They also think of Krishna, but enviously, just like King Kamsa, Krishna's uncle. He was also thinking of Krishna always, but he thought of Krishna as his enemy. He was always in anxiety, wondering when Krishna would come to kill him. That kind of thinking will not help us. One should be thinking of Krishna in devotional love. That is bhakti. One should cultivate the knowledge of Krishna continuously. What is that favorable cultivation? It is to learn from a bona fide teacher. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we have several times explained that his body is not material, but is eternal, blissful knowledge. This kind of talk about Krishna will help one become a devotee. Understanding Krishna otherwise, from the wrong source, will prove fruitless. One should therefore engage his mind in the eternal form, the primal form of Krishna, with conviction in his heart that Krishna is the Supreme. He should engage himself in worship. There are hundreds of thousands of temples in India for the worship of Krishna, and devotional service is practiced there. When such practice is made, one has to offer obeisances to Krishna. One should lower his head before the deity and engage his mind, his body, his activities every day. That will make one fully absorbed in Krishna without deviation. This will help one transfer to the Krishna Loka. One should not be deviated by unscrupulous commentators. One must engage in the 9 different processes of devotional service, beginning with hearing and chanting about Krishna. Pure devotional service is the highest achievement of human society. The 7th and 8th chapters of Bhagavad Gita have explained pure devotional service to the Lord that is free from speculative knowledge, mystic yoga, and fruitive activities. Those who are not purely sanctified may be attracted by different features of the Lord, like the impersonal Brahmajyoti and localized Paramatma, but a pure devotee directly takes the service of the Supreme Lord. There is a beautiful poem about Krishna in which it is clearly stated that any person who is engaged in the worship of demigods is most unintelligent and cannot achieve at any time the supreme award of Krishna. The devotee in the beginning may sometimes fall from the standard, but still he should be considered superior to all other philosophers and yogis. One who always engages in Krishna consciousness should be understood to be a perfectly saintly person. His accidental non-devotional activities will diminish. and he will soon be situated without any doubt in complete perfection. The pure devotee has no actual chance to fall down because the Supreme Lord personally takes care of his pure devotees. Therefore, the intelligent person should take directly to the process of Krishna consciousness and happily live in this material world. He will eventually receive the supreme award of Krishna. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports, the 9th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita in the matter of the most confidential knowledge. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Transcendental Purports Ki. Jai. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnana Shalakya Chakshur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Savadanarunatam Yutam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Mata Savadana Lalita Shri Vishakam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Neelabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhandu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaure Vishe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyagevascha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Uttara Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. So this is the concluding verse, and therefore it is considered to be the essence of the essence of the essence. If you think about it carefully, that's what actually it is. Amongst all the Vedic literatures, we know that the Bhagavad Gita is the essential. It is the most essential of all the Vedic literatures. It is very nicely stated. What is that? Sarva Upadishodau Dugdha Gopa Nandanaha Partha Vatsa Sudhir Bhukta Dugdham Gila Vidam Maha. So this is very nicely stated by Shastras that actually of all the Upanishads, the Gita is like the milk of the cow. And the cow is the Upanishad, and therefore Bhagavad Gita is the essence. So already just coming to the Bhagavad Gita, it gives us the understanding that the Bhagavad Gita itself is the quintessential Vedic scripture. This is the first essence that we understand. Then we can also understand from the Gita itself that you will know by now that the middle 6 chapters of the Gita, in between the other 2 sets, the middle 6 chapters of the Gita, our acharyas tell us, is actually literally supposed to be focusing purely on bhakti. So the middle 6 chapters are considered to be extremely important. And they are the essence of the Gita. So you have the Gita, you have the middle 6 chapters. You know, the middle 6 chapters is considered to be the very essential part of the Gita, like a content. Sometimes devotees give the example of a sandwich, right? You have the 2 pieces of the sandwich, and then in between you have the content. Nobody calls a sandwich a bread sandwich. People only call sandwich cheese sandwich, isn't it? Or whatever sandwich you call it. Because it's the middle that's very important. So therefore, just like Bhagavad Gita is the essence, on top of the Bhagavad Gita, the essence of Bhagavad Gita, in the 18 chapters, the middle 6 chapters are considered extremely important. And from the middle 6 chapters, we understand that chapter 9 is considered to be the chapter that is considered to be Raja Guhyam. In other words, it contains the most confidential knowledge. Confidential here doesn't mean secret. Secret means we should not be speaking about it. right? There's a difference. In the material world, when you use the word secret, it means it cannot be revealed. We can't speak about it. But in Shastra, when you say something is confidential, it means it is the essence of the knowledge that we are getting. Why is it then considered confidential? It's considered confidential because it's extremely valuable. This is a very important point. Valuable is a part of being confidential. If something is confidential, it must be valuable. Otherwise, why are we keeping it confidential? Everybody is very happy to hear about confidential knowledge, isn't it? Because everyone wants to know about it because everyone thinks it's valuable. So the most confidential knowledge is therefore considered to be the most valuable knowledge. And therefore this particular chapter is considered the most confidential knowledge. So you have Gita, you have the 6 chapters, and then you have this chapter. So you have the essence of the essence of the essence. There's 3 essentials. And now we come to the final verse of this chapter. And you all know that the final verses of every Bhagavad Gita chapter is practically and in very, very, very lucid and very expert summary of the entire chapter. And therefore 934 becomes the essence of the essence of the essence of the essence. And that's why this verse is very important. Very often when you hear this verse being spoken by commentators who speak about impersonalist philosophy, they will very often downplay this verse because this verse for them seems too simple for it to be confidential. Krishna makes it very clear here, right? What do you have to do to become my devotee? And for the impersonalists, it's very difficult for them to understand that because in the first place, they have no understanding of God as a personality. Therefore, for them, this is not a very essential verse. And so that's a very important point for us to understand. This verse is also considered very, very essential out of the 4 levels of essentiality because this is the verse that quintessentially defines devotional service very clearly. If we have doubts about what devotional service is, this verse makes it very clear, crystal clear. Not only does it tell us what devotional service is and defines it, but it also guarantees us that if we adopt this process, we will go back home and we will go back to God. This is a very important point. Because the goal of a devotee is not to linger anywhere. The goal of the devotee ultimately is to actually provide and render unmotivated and uninterrupted devotional service. And that devotional service assures the devotee of eternally being connected to Krishna and eventually going back home, back to God. So, savai pumsam paro dharmo, right? Yator bhakti radho saje. We may have so many dharmas, but Shastra is very clear that the most important dharma is always to render devotional service unto the Supreme Lord. And that devotional service must be ahaituki apratihata. It must actually be unmotivated in the way we approach Krishna. In other words, there should not be a tinge of material motive. Whatever reason we come to Krishna, it is always to glorify Him. So it is ahaituki. The second element of this devotional service is apratihata. Apratihata means that it will be uninterrupted. This is also very important. Sometimes people ask the question, can I have a devotional service which is uninterrupted if I am motivated? You can't. Because if you look at the purport that Srila Prabhupada gives in 6.16.34 of Srimad Bhagavatam, there Prabhupada is very clear. I think it's towards the end of the first paragraph or the beginning of the second paragraph. Prabhupada clearly states that actually, in order for you to render uninterrupted devotional service, you must actually perform devotional service in an unmotivated manner. It is very clear, right? So ahaituki has to come before apratihata can come. Sometimes we think about why is it that our devotional service is interrupted? Why is it disrupted? Why is my chanting not up to the mark? Why am I reading one day and next day I don't read? Why am I so inconsistent? The inconsistency in our devotional service is really because of our motives when we approach Krishna. The moment our motive is not correct, then all kinds of obstacles will come on the path of our bhakti. This is a very important point. So this is why this verse is considered to be so important. Now there are certain elements of this verse that we should keep in mind. The first element of the verse is that Krishna is telling us, looking at the purport, Srila Prabhupada brings up a very important point. Srila Prabhupada tells us, Krishna is telling us how to be delivered from the clutches of this contaminated material world. If you read the purport, Prabhupada uses the word contaminated material world. So this is a very important point. Very often as devotees, even though we are taking up devotional service, it's very easy for us to forget that actually all around us, the material atmosphere is contaminated. In another part of Bhagavatam, another way of describing contamination is polluted material existence or polluted existence. Why is this contamination so strong? Because it is the nature of the material world. This we cannot escape from. So the moment we come into this world, we should understand that the nature of this world is actually contamination. And Krishna says, Prabhupada says this very important point. One of the features of the contamination of material existence is actually the unscrupulous and faithless nature of commentators who speak of the Gita. If you look at the first part of Prabhupada's purport, Jai Shri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Mai Ki. If you look at the first part of Srila Prabhupada's purport, you'll find Prabhupada starts immediately by speaking about unscrupulous commentators. Very important point. Prabhupada says that the problem with these commentators is that they read the Gita, and after reading the Gita, they distort the meaning of the verse. Very simple thing here. This verse, if you read, clearly tells us that devotional service should be offered to Krishna. Right? If you look at the verse, Krishna says very clearly, engage your mind always in thinking of me. And then become my devotee. And then offer obeisances to me. And then worship me. How many times the me comes? There's 3 me's and there's 1 my. And then after that, being completely absorbed in me, there's another me. You will come to me. There's no end to the me's, isn't it? Krishna is saying me so many times. But if you read other commentators, they will draw a distinction. They will say the me here does not refer to the personality of Krishna. They will say the me here actually refers to the soul which is within Krishna, which is different, right? Which is impersonal, which is the highest. So Prabhupada says, if something is directly apparent to us, then what is the need for interpretation? This is very important. If you have learned Sanskrit and you've learned how to argue these arguments, you realize that there's such a thing as a literal meaning and there's such a thing as an interpretation of it. If something is so clear in a literal sense, there is no need to interpret it. It's a general rule, even in the material world. And yet commentators will do that. So the first thing we have to remember, Prabhus and Matajis, is never to take for granted the fact that actually this verse tells us that whatever service that we do, it must only be offered to Krishna. That's it. It is not offered to any other person. Krishna is not ordinary, and there is no distinction between Krishna, his name, his fame, his activities, and his pastimes. It's very clear. At the very beginning of Ishopanishad, we have the famous invocation, isn't it? In that invocation, it is so nicely stated, Om Purnam Adha Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Udachyate. This is a very simple point. And then it goes on to say Purnasya Purnam Adhaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. And the meaning is very clear. This is an invocation to the Upanishad. The personality of Godhead is perfect and He is complete. What does that mean? Perfect and complete. Because He is completely perfect, then whatever emanations that come from Krishna, such as this world, it is actually completely equipped. They are not separate from Krishna and they are complete within themselves. And whatever that is produced from the complete whole is also complete. So every manifestation of Krishna is as complete as what Krishna is. This is very important. So how can Krishna then be separate? His name is something else, his fame is something else, his body is something else. If something is complete, therefore by nature it is absolute. Please remember this. When something is complete, by nature it is absolute. And this is the whole point why Lord Jagannath also came into this world. If we know the pastimes of the Lord, and we have read about how, and we have heard about how Indradyumna Maharaj, with so much determination, brought Jagannath into this world. But Indradipta Maharaj was very surprised, if you recall, when Vishwakarma, by the arrangement of the Lord, left their lordships in this kind of a form. Initially, Indradipta Maharaj was horrified because he thought to himself, how can it be that we have an incomplete form of the Lord? This is not complete. But Narada Muni would come later and he would explain this form of the Lord is not accidental. Neither is it capricious. This form of the Lord is perfect and complete and purna. Because the Lord, by showing that his arms, he doesn't have full stretched arms, he doesn't have legs, but he's pointing out an important principle that Srila Prabhupada is pointing out in this purport. And that is, Krishna is absolute in nature. The Lord may not have hands and legs, but believe me, as Jagannath, he is taking more prasadam than any other form known to the world or to the universe. Right? There is no end to feeding Jagannath. And yet, Jagannath himself does not appear to have hands and legs. Why? Because Jagannath, the Lord, the Supreme Lord, he can eat with his eyes and he can sit with his mouth. He can do anything because he's absolute. So this point is mistaken and missed by the commentators. Why? Because they have no faith and understanding of the true nature of Krishna. So please, whenever we are also in difficulty, whenever we are bewildered, the reason for our bewilderment is actually nothing else but the fact that either we have no faith or we have not understood the nature of Krishna. This is a very important point. If supposing someone is in great difficulty, and as a devotee, we are unable to digest why devotees are in difficulty, then we don't understand the nature of Krishna. Krishna is absolute. Therefore, whatever he does, Srila Prabhupada says, is always good. There is nothing bad that comes from Krishna. It is how we react to what comes from Krishna. That is our issue. Whether we react in the mood of a great devotee, or we react in the mood of one who has no faith. But it has nothing to do with Krishna. Krishna remains Purna. He remains complete. And he remains absolute. So this point is important. Therefore, Prabhupada says very clearly, no Devata can claim this from Krishna. It's very difficult. Today, we were all discussing Bhagavatam just 1-2 hours ago, the Prabhus. And we did 1:17:34, isn't it, Prabhu? Right? In 1:17:34, it's very nicely stated, this point that Srila Prabhupada brings up in the purport. Just see how Prabhupada says it here. Is it there, Prabhu? Yeah. You can just go down. Yes, over here. It is even sometimes seen that demigods like Indra and Chandra are worshipped and offered sacrificial awards. Yet the rewards of all such sacrifices are awarded to the worshipper by the Supreme Lord. And it is the Lord only who can offer all welfare to the worshipper. This is very important. The demigods, although worshipped, cannot do anything without the sanction of the Lord. Because the Lord is the super soul of everyone, both moving and non-moving. So this is very clear. It's very clear. No matter who we pray to, ultimately they can only give us what is sanctioned by Krishna. If supposing you pray to a Devata and Devata says, hold on, you think I can give it to you, but I have to go and ask Krishna. If by Krishna's arrangement you're not supposed to get it, you won't get it. By Krishna's arrangement, if we can live for 100 years, we'll live for 100 years. If Krishna's arrangement, we cannot live for that long, then no matter what we do, we can stand on our heads upside down for the next 30,000 years, which by the way we cannot live. Then even then we will not be able to prolong life. So this is a very important point we should remember. And the reason why we become bewildered is because we don't see the absolute nature of Krishna. And therefore in desperation, we observe so many different festivals, so many different ceremonies, hoping that these things will bring us some comfort and hoping that it will bring us some kind of benefit and relief. But Krishna and Prabhupada is very nicely, clearly stating here that there is no relief, there is no welfare coming from anyone except the Supreme Lord. And by the way, another term for the word welfare is protection. Please don't forget that. Whenever Krishna is taking care of our welfare, He is always protecting us. This is a very important point for us to remember. We may be thinking, why are we in a situation where it appears like we are in difficulty? the difficulty may appear to be a difficulty, but for a devotee, a difficulty is an opportunity. An opportunity for us to deepen our faith in Krishna and to see his hand in it. Parikshit Maharaj was cursed by Shringi Brahmana. But instead of crying and moaning and complaining, right, he didn't do that. If it was the normal world today, Parikshit Maharaj would have sued Shringi Brahmana, isn't it? That's what he would have tried to do. Or he would have tried to reverse the curse of Shringi Brahmana. But he didn't waste time. He thought the curse has come. It has come through because Krishna has sanctioned it. Now what do I do with the curse? Do I waste my time thinking of the curse day and night? Or do I use that opportunity to remember Krishna? And he used that opportunity to remember Krishna. In the end, Shringi Brahmana was consumed by his own anger. But Parikshit Maharaj was not consumed by the fire of the snake bird. If you read Bhagavatam carefully, his mind and his heart and his entire absorption had completely divested him from his material body. So that whatever that was burning was just the sharir of Parikshit Maharaj. So that is how we conquer the difficulties of the world. By understanding the nature of Krishna. So sometimes we may think, what is so important? We know he's absolute. We know he's complete. Really? If we do and times are difficult, why do we lose faith? Why do we lose faith when times are difficult? That means we have not accepted the true nature of Krishna. That is why Prabhupada is emphasizing this point. So we cannot take it for granted. This is the first point for us to understand. Following from this point about the absolute nature of Krishna, 424 Bhagavad Gita is extremely important. Because in 424 Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says very nicely and he makes it very clear that a person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, and you will see the word absorbed in today's verse also, right? A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, what happens to that person is given in 424. If we are really absorbed in Krishna consciousness, we will attain the spiritual kingdom. Why? Because of our full contribution to spiritual activities. Therefore, in simple language, if we continuously, without any motive, continuously serve Krishna, that contribution that we are trying to give Krishna becomes the doorway to the spiritual world. You see the point? And if you look at the last part of the purport, Prabhupada makes an exceptional point. I think it starts with, in that condition of spiritual consciousness. Is it there, Prabhu?
Yes.
In that condition of spiritual purport. In that condition of spiritual consciousness, yes, the contributor, the contribution, the consumption, the performer, or leader of the performance, and the result of the ultimate gain, everything becomes one in the absolute, the supreme Brahman. That is the matter of Krishna consciousness. Which means, the moment we start Krishna consciousness, whatever activity that we do for Krishna, whether we are contributing, whether we are part of the contributor or we are the contributed. Maybe someone is telling, maybe someone starts a service and you contribute to that service. Someone takes up the service and takes it further. Someone consumes the benefit of the service. Now Rath Yatra is coming. All of you are going to either do some kind of service. That is your contribution. Okay? Then after your contribution, you are the contributor. That you become Krishna conscious. The contribution that you have given, that becomes Krishna conscious. After you have contributed, whoever consumes your contribution, supposing you have made nice prasadam, right? I think there's some stalls coming up, isn't it? Okay, you're going to make nice prasadam, public buys it, they consume it. That consumption also brings absorption. After they have consumed it, then the performer, whoever's performing that activity, the leader of the performance, and even the result of the ultimate gain. What is the ultimate gain of Rath Yatra? Everybody remembers Krishna. What does it mean? Everything becomes one with the Absolute. This is the meaning of Krishna being Absolute. So never think that, oh, in the material worlds, these things that happen to me, Krishna has nothing to do with it. Krishna has everything to do with everything. But don't blame Krishna. Glorify Krishna. Because of the welfare that he's giving all of us as devotees. This is very important. That is what a devotee does. And because a devotee does that, then he's free from the second feature of material contamination. So first feature of material contamination, unscrupulous commentary, but to counter that, we should understand the absolute nature of Krishna. That's the first thing. The second point now, the second feature of material contamination, Prabhupada brings up in the purport, is actually the envious nature of persons. Prabhupada says there are many envious people there, and they are so envious of Krishna that they cannot even understand, or they don't want to accept, that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And you know what, very often in Bhagavatam, it is stated that if you are envious of Krishna, you are actually filled with self-envy. Self-envy. So sometimes people ask, how can I be envious of Krishna? Therefore it means I'm envious of myself? How can that be? I'm not jealous of myself. In fact, I'm very happy with myself. I'm jealous of everybody, but I'm not jealous with myself. So what does self-envy mean? Srila Prabhupada in a lecture in 934, he says it very nicely. He says that the soul, Atmanam, in our shloka there is Atmanam. Atmanam is the soul. And the soul is always part and parcel of Krishna. Soul can never be divested from Krishna. It may be in Sharir, material body, but it is always part of Krishna. And therefore, if it is part of Krishna, it is like you are part of your father and mother. If you are envious of your father and mother, actually you are envious of yourself. Because you have come from them. You see the point? You have actually derived your life from them. From a material point of view, you're coming from your parents. That's why children who are envious of parents are considered highly demonic. Because normally speaking, we are never envious of our parents. We are very proud of them. We don't find fault with them. When you find fault with someone, then the reason for finding fault is very often because of envy. That is why we are finding fault. Fault finding is coming very often from envy. So therefore, if we are fault finding Krishna, we are part of Krishna, we are actually performing spiritual suicide. And that is coming from self-envy. You see the point? So therefore, the envious people, like Kamsa for example, Prabhupada says, Kamsa was very envious of Krishna. He would walk everywhere, and the moment he saw the number 8 anywhere, he would only think of Krishna. Yes, he was very absorbed in Krishna, no doubt. Probably he had more Krishna consciousness than you and I, because he was daily thinking of Krishna. But his thinking of Krishna, Prabhupada writes, was not favorable. It was not favorable. And because it was not favorable, therefore, he is not a devotee of Krishna. And if we have association of such persons, then this verse and understanding this verse is lost to us. You see the point? Very important. There is a shloka, sometimes people bring up this point. 7.131 of Srimad Bhagavatam. When you have time, you see that shloka. It's a very nice shloka. Gopya kamad bhayat kamso dvecha chaidyadayo dripaha sambandhat krishnaya sneha yuyam bhaktya vayam vibho. This is a very famous chapter, and acharyas refer to it very often. The title of the chapter is interesting. The Supreme Lord is equal to everyone. But see this shloka. My dear King Yudhishthira, the gopis by their lusty desires, Kamsa by his fear, Shishupal and other kings by envy, the Yadus by their familial relationship with Krishna, you Pandavas by your great affection for Krishna, and we, the general devotees, by our devotional service, we have all obtained the mercy of Krishna. So in one sense, Kamsa is in the category of obtaining the mercy of Krishna. He is. But the only problem is, the mercy of Krishna on such envious persons like Kamsa is very great, because they attain liberation. At least one of the 5 they will attain. Somewhere along the line, whether it's Sayuja or Salokya or Sarupya or Samipya or Shashti, they will attain it. In Shishupal's case, he merged in. In Kamsa's case, he also merged. So sometimes people think Krishna is so merciful that even if you are Kamsa, you will still get merged into Krishna. But what they don't understand, and why Prabhupada is bringing up Kamsa as an example here, is because while Kamsa is remembering Krishna, to become a devotee of Krishna, one must remember Krishna favorably. And one must remember Krishna without envy. And if you want to remember Krishna, then you must obey Krishna. the cousin of remembrance is obedience. Very often we say, I'm remembering Krishna. But the real symptom of remembrance is, are we obeying Krishna? Ye me matam idam nitya anutishtanti manavaha shraddhavanto anasuyanto tepi muchanti karmabihi. 331 of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna makes it very clear there. For those who follow my injunctions, and they follow it shraddhavanto anasuyanto. They follow it with faith and without envy. For those who follow it with faith and without envy, they become free from the bondage of fruitive action. This is very important. Kamsa did not have faith in Krishna. He had no faith, and he definitely was envious of Krishna. Therefore, Kamsa's remembrance of Krishna by Sastric point is considered unfavorable. You may attain mukti, but you do not attain bhakti. Please remember that there is a difference. Mukti is a subset of bhakti, but bhakti is never a subset of mukti. A devotee who is a bhakta or a devotee, automatically Bilvamangal Thakur says that liberation stands by the doorway of a devotee with folded hands like a maidservant, ready to render service. Imagine, Bilvamangal Thakur is a very great acharya, and he understood this point, right? He understood how much important is bhakti. And he remembered, and because of his own life, he understood that bhakti means undeviated. Mukti, there are so many different muktis. But when we have bhakti, bhakti is very, very dear to Krishna. So someone may be liberated for a while. Impersonalists are liberated for a while. But after a while, they do come back here. They may merge into the Brahmajyoti. But Srila Prabhupada also stated that after a while, they come back to this material world. And when Prabhupada was asked, why Prabhupada do impersonalists come back to this material world after all they're liberated, Prabhupada explained very nicely, because they get bored. They don't know what to do. They have no service. And therefore they're not occupied. You see? But devotees are always occupied. Somehow or another. Now we're all sitting down. We are occupied just by hearing about Krishna. That is occupation. That is parodharma. So therefore, please remember, there is a vast difference. Bhakti is transcendental even to mukti. Devotees are not interested in liberation. Nanaka prishtam, na chaparameshtam, na sarva bhaumam, na rasadipatyam, na yoga siddhira punarbhavam va, samanjasatva virahaya kamshe. Vritrasur says very clearly in the second of his 4 prayers that I have no taste. Nanaka prishtam. I don't desire dominion over this material world, Dhruva Loka, lower planets or higher planets. I don't even desire any yogic siddhi. I don't even desire any form of liberation. As long as I have an opportunity to remember Krishna, that is sufficient for me. You see the point? So therefore, devotees are not interested in liberating themselves. The liberation for a devotee is in service to Krishna. That is liberation. Now, Rath Yatra is coming. We're all going to be very busy. But in our busyness for Krishna lies our liberation from this material atmosphere. Now, at this moment, many of us know that Smriti Radha Mataji is facing a great challenge in her life. But we also know that by being absorbed in chanting the holy names of the Lord, the welfare of Mataji is completely in the hands of the Lord. That is actually liberation. So liberation is not the liberation that we speak about. Liberation for a devotee means the ability to perform devotional service. That is a very important point. So bhakti is above all of this, and mukti is not important for a bhakta. It will come automatically. That's all it needs actually. So this important point we should remember. Now the other thing that also is very important is we do not understand Krishna from the wrong sources. This is very important. Sometimes a devotee may hear or read the Bhagavad Gita, but the Bhagavad Gita may be coming from a wrong source. It is not coming from a bona fide source. It is not coming from disciplic succession, parampara. So Prabhupada says in the purport, if you want to hear the Gita, Hear the Gita as it is. Which is why scholars all over the world recognize that Prabhupada's commentary on the Gita is completely bona fide. It is as pure can be. And even a child can read it. There's so many children who read the Bhagavad Gita. But I've had experience where sophisticated, educated professors, for example, may read the Gita, but they are bewildered by the Gita. Because they are looking for something so complicated that it doesn't exist. The Gita is simple, but it is sublime. And because someone has faith in the Gita, then the Gita unlocks itself. It reveals itself. Don't forget, all scriptures are revelatory in nature. It is revelatory in nature. Right? I think which verse? Is it the third shloka of our Chatur shloka? Krishna says very, very simply that actually it is the intelligence that is being given is coming from Krishna. So Krishna awards us the intelligence on how to come to Him, how to attain Him. We are not the intelligent people reading the Gita. We've got that wrong. We don't need intelligence to read Gita. We need bhakti to read Gita. From bhakti, Krishna automatically will give us the necessary intelligence. That's it. So we don't need to count our IQs before we read the Gita. This is a very, very important point. So please, when we read Gita, take it from the right source. And Prabhupada goes one step further in the purport. The right source to hear the Gita is from the bona fide spiritual master. This is very, very important. The bona fide spiritual master can give you truth because he is Tadvadarshinaha. He is one who has seen truth. You cannot give something, you cannot give an experience to someone if you have not experienced it yourself. Isn't it true? When you have experienced something, then on the level of experience you can share something. If you have not seen how some place looks like, you cannot describe it to another person. You can't. If you've never been to Alaska, and I ask you, Prabhu, how is Alaska? I can't tell you exactly how it is. I can tell you how it is in the pictures, but I cannot tell you how it is because I've not been there. I've not done that. So experience comes from the spiritual master. And therefore, when we surrender to the spiritual master, then we actually get into the inner sanctum of bhakti. This is very important. Kamsa was not interested in surrendering to Krishna, nor to the devotees. The level of our surrender determines the level and depth of our bhakti. This is very important. So, these are the three things that come forward to us in Srila Prabhupada's purports. Now Prabhupada goes into the actual verse. And in the actual verse, when I was reading Prabhupada's lecture and looking at the purport, Prabhupada makes it very clear. He says, what is the difficulty? In the lecture, Prabhupada starts by saying, what is the difficulty? He says, there are only 4 things you need to do. And you can hear Prabhupada is surrounded by Pradyumna, and I think he's also with, I forget the name. I know Pradyumna is there, and a few others. And so he's sitting down. The first question he asks is, what is the difficulty? That's what this verse is saying. Because Prabhupada says, there are only 4 things we have to do. If we do these 4, then the last 2 lines represent the result of what happens when you do these 4. So he says the first thing is manmana. Manmana bhava. And manmana means always think of me. Think of me. That's what Prabhupada is saying. And Prabhupada says, thinking means, first of all, you think of who? You think of Krishna. Because Krishna uses the word me. Krishna doesn't say, hey, think of this person, think of that person. No. Thinking by itself has no value. In material world, when you use your mind, you realize the nature of mind is always to disturb you. Have you all been in situations where you overthink something? It happens all the time, isn't it? Somebody didn't talk to you nicely, you overthink. In the end, right? It's like, you become so worried and you become completely bewildered. But nothing happened actually. Maybe the person didn't even see you, but you overthink. Sometimes there is a situation, we panic and we overthink. That happens all the time. From thinking comes speculation, isn't it? Speculation is a function of thought. But here, Krishna is saying, think. You can use your mind, but think of me. That is the difference. If Krishna did not put the word me, then our thinking will be purely material. But because me is there, manmana bhava, it is manmana bhava, it is to Krishna. Therefore, that becomes more important. So Prabhupada says, you must think of Krishna and no one else. That is the key. The more we are focused on remembering Krishna, the more our thinking will become absorption. This is a very important point. The less we can concentrate on Krishna, the more our thinking becomes speculation. You see, thinking can move into absorption, but if you are not thinking hard enough, or if you are not working hard enough for Krishna, it can very easily slide into speculation. That's why sometimes even when we become devotees, instead of finding out what is actually stated in Shastra and following it, we have the tendency to speculate. We have a tendency to speculate. I think this is like that, I think like that. But when we ask them, find me the reference in Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam that gives credibility to what you say, we can't, because it is coming out from our mind. So if we have to think of Krishna and no one else. The next point Prabhupada says, Krishna means his pastime, his paraphernalia, his form and his qualities. And Krishna never comes alone. That's the beauty of Krishna. When Krishna comes, a whole gang comes with Krishna. Just like devotees. Have you noticed? When devotees come, a whole gang of devotees come. We have a habit, as devotees, wherever we go, right, we go as gangs. Have you noticed that? Wherever we go. Very often what happens is when sannyasis or maharajas come and the car is outside, and then all the devotees go out, and we forget we're in the middle of Stratton Road, we forget that cars are coming, and cars are horning and everything, but we are completely bewildered. Because we're just completely absorbed. So actually, Krishna always comes with his entourage. Which is why when we serve devotees, we please Krishna. This is a very important point. It is imputed here that Krishna means his pastimes. Krishna never performs his pastimes alone. He's always performing it with his devotees. Now the other point Prabhupada brings up, and you can see it in the word to word here. When you talk about manmana, you see the word to word is always thinking of me, right? And the beauty of this translation is Prabhupada starts with the word engage. Engage. Why is there engage there, and at the top it is thinking of me? Because Prabhupada says in the lecture, when you think of Krishna, you are actually, even unknown to you, you are engaging your mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. So thinking produces engagement. And engagement doesn't just mean you are engaging your mind. When you engage your mind on Krishna, you will engage your senses in serving Krishna. Isn't it true? The more we engage our mind in Krishna, the more ready we are to perform services for Krishna. This is very important. If our mind is disengaged from Krishna, then we will just float down. If you like cars and you know cars, you will know the whole purpose of the gear is to engage. You disengage the gear and the car will just roll down the road. It's neutral. But if you engage the gear, that's when the car has momentum. That's when the car has direction. So until you turn thinking into engagement, your thinking will be speculative. So therefore, not only must we think about Krishna, but we must engage our mind in remembering him. It is deeper. Prabhupada goes on in the lecture to say how to engage your mind. And then he uses another word. Thinking is one thing, engaging is another level, and then Krishna says, occupy. Prabhupada says, occupy our minds with thoughts of Krishna. This is very nice. Occupy our minds with thoughts of Krishna. And if you remember Bhishma Dev's prayers, I think it's 1932 of Srimad Bhagavatam. It's the first prayer. Iti mati rupa kalpita vitrishna. In that shloka, very nicely Bhishma Dev says, let me now invest my thinking, feeling, and willing, which were for so long absorbed or engaged in different subjects. Let me now, let me now invest this thinking, feeling, and willing in the all-powerful Lord Krishna. That's what he says. So Bhishma Dev is a great example of thinking, how absorbed he was. Even though he had occupational duties throughout his life, even though he was in the middle of all precarious political situations, Bhishma Dev never stopped thinking of Krishna. Which is why at the end, on the bed of arrows, his mind was completely invested. So actually, when we think of Krishna, we should engage our senses, engage ourselves, The more we engage ourselves in Krishna consciousness, the more we think of Krishna. The more we think of Krishna, the more we engage ourselves. And how do you engage yourself? Occupy yourself with something to do for Krishna. Very important. Idle mind is the devil's workshop, isn't it? It is. The moment you are too free, you will end up doing everything except Krishna consciousness. It's very easy for the mind to tell you, I will do it later. But now I will do this, I will do that, I will do this. In the end, we will never do anything for Krishna. So many times we have told ourselves, I must study some shlokas, or I must come and do some service. But the mind will give you so many different arguments. Why? Because it's not occupied. It's not occupied. So this is where we have to push ourselves. And to occupy ourselves, we must invest. This is very important. Such a nice thing. Thinking, right? Engaging, right? When you think, Bhishmadev says you start feeling about it. When you feel something, you start willing yourself to do it. Now all of you in the morning must have been thinking, shall I come for the lecture? Shall I come for the program? Thinking. But because you were absorbed in your thinking, then you started to feel, yes, I must come. I feel like coming. And after a while, after feeling like that, then either you took MRT, or you took Grab, or you flew here, I don't know. But you came here, right? You ended up here, you see? Because through thinking, feeling and willing, you were investing your energy in Krishna. And that pleases Krishna. And when you do that, Krishna gives you the facility to come to Him. Not just the intelligence, but the facility to come to Him. Why? Because He's Samanjas. He is the source of all opportunities. And when you have an opportunity and use it for Krishna, Krishna always helps you. Always helps you. This is the greatness of Krishna. So this is very important. I think you know how great personalities in Bhagavatam engage themselves. You have the famous Ambarish Maharaj, isn't it? In 9.4, I think 9th canto, 4th chapter, 18 to 20th verse. Savai Manaha Krishna Padar Vindo. In that famous verse, Vachamsi Vaikunta Gunanuvardhana. It is there that we understand, practically speaking, what does it mean to do Manmana Bhava, to think of Krishna. When you think of Krishna, your senses will follow you. You just look at Ambarish Maharaj. Ambarish Maharaj engaged his mind in meditating upon the form of Krishna, the lotus feet of Krishna. Because he was meditating, he could use his words to describe the glories of Krishna. Then he could use his hands in cleaning the Krishna's temple. He could use his ears in hearing about Krishna. He could actually engage his eyes in seeing Krishna. He could engage his sense of smell in smelling the aroma of tulsi leaves of Krishna. He could engage his sense of tongue in partaking prasadam from Krishna. And most important, he could bow his head before Krishna. Because he was completely engaged. He was absorbed. He was thinking. So you see, where your mind goes, your senses follow. And therefore, if you let your mind not dwell on Krishna, then your senses will never be with Krishna. This is why Manmana Bhava Mad Bhakta. And Mad Bhakta is the second part of it. So that part is very clear. This attachment to Krishna will come when you are devotee. This is very important. Prabhupada says in his lecture that if you are a devotee, you can think of Krishna. If you can't think of Krishna, then how can you be devotee? For Prabhupada, it's very simple. The definition of a devotee is one who is thinking of Krishna, one who is remembering Krishna, and therefore become devotee of Krishna. If you're unfavorable to Krishna, you are not devotee of Krishna. Therefore, you cannot think of Krishna. Why? Because you'll be envious of Krishna. You won't be thinking favorably of Him. You won't have the conviction to serve Krishna. This is important. And Prabhupada says also that when we serve Krishna, we serve no one else but Krishna. This is very important. Be loyal to Krishna. That is very important. That's why here, engage your mind always in thinking of me. Then you will become my devotee. It's all Krishna. There's nobody else. And it doesn't matter, Prabhupada says, that come whatever may, whatever challenges are there, whatever obstacles we may face in devotional service, we should never back off from serving Krishna, thinking of Krishna, and persevering. We should never. Otherwise, think of it. The Pandavas suffered more than all of us put together. Even if we put down all our sufferings together, I still don't think we can actually match the Pandavas. They suffered like anything in Bhagavatam, isn't it true? And yet, the Pandavas never forgot Krishna. They never got angry with Krishna. They never got irritated with Krishna. They didn't think to themselves, okay, now enough of Krishna. Let's go and find some other Devata. Because of Krishna, we are in 13 years exile. They never blamed anyone. They never. Whenever we are in difficulty or some problem is there, our first instinct is that we find something or someone to blame. And when that happens, are we thinking of Krishna? No. Half the time we are thinking of that person. He's to be blamed. You want to be blamed. He did this, or he didn't do that, or she said that, and he didn't say that. Something. We just move away from Krishna. That's why the great devotees of the Lord, they do anything, but they move towards Krishna. Bilbal Mangal Thakur, if you recall, he was very, very in love with a prostitute called Chintamani. And he would do anything to go and see her. He crossed over a very, very terrible storm. He crossed over the lake or the river that was running. And how did he cross over? By holding on to what he thought was a log, but it was a corpse. And he was a Brahmana. He shouldn't be touching corpse, but he got on a corpse and he went. Then he crossed the forest and he reached her house. It was dark. He thought how to climb the window to see Chintamani. He saw a rope. He thought it was a rope, but it was a snake. Didn't matter to him. He just climbed using the snake. And when he came up there, Chintamani saw him and said, "How did you come here? There was so much of rain, nobody is moving, there's a snake outside, I dare not even open the window." And he said, "I did this all because of my love for you." And he thought Chintamani would just, become so happy with him. But Chintamani just looked at him and said, "If only you had diverted all this attention, all this effort, all this thought, all this absorption to Krishna, how much more blissful and happy you will be." And that was the start, right, of Bilba Mangal Thakur's spiritual journey. Because Chintamani woke him up. She literally woke him up. And he realized then that, what am I running after? It should be Krishna. And yet I am going for everything else except Krishna. And so he left everything. And he went to Vrindavan. But there in Vrindavan, he went into the house. And the owner came and his wife came to serve him. When he saw his wife, that owner's wife, he was riddled with lust for her. And again he was caught up by a diversion. And so he asked her that he wanted to take permission to actually enjoy her. And the husband was such a gentleman that he said, "Whatever our guest is asking, we have to give." But then when Bilba Mangal Thakur realized that he was going out of order, it is something amazing. He asked this lady for a pin, and he took the pin, and with the pin he just blinded his own eyes. Why did he do that? So that he would never be able to look at an object of beauty which was not Krishna. And he did that because he did not want to divert from devotional service. So thinking, feeling, willing, absorption, being occupied, being engaged, these are all things that we must put into our spiritual life. Then we become a devotee. That is very important. Madhavendra Puri says very beautifully, I think in the purport of 2:4, but the verse is 3 and 4. In that purport, one of my favorite verses, Madhavendra Puri says this, Muktam mam nidagantu niti nipuna brantam muhur vaidikaha mandam bandhava sanchaya jatadiyam muktadara shodara unmatam dhanino viveka chatura kamam mahadambikam muktam na shamate mana api mana govinda pada spraham. The translation Srila Prabhupada gives is very nice. Let the sharp moralist accuse me of being illusion. I don't mind. Let the experts in Vedic activities slander me as being misled. It's all right. Let my friends and my relatives call me frustrated. Sometimes when you take up Krishna consciousness, they think, because he lost his job, that's why he's becoming sadhu. It happens, I've told you before, right? The first time we became vegetarians in my house, I remember my uncles calling my mother and saying, is it because you don't have money to buy meat? That's why you all are becoming vegetarians? So people always say something. So Madhavendra Puri says, let them slander me, doesn't matter. Let my friends and relatives call me frustrated, it's okay. Let my brothers call me a fool, it doesn't matter. Let the wealthy people think I must be mad because I'm running after everything except money. And let the learned philosophers think that I am too much proud because I don't want to engage in philosophy. But he says one last point. This is a prayer of a devotee. Let my mind not budge an inch from the determination to serve the lotus feet of Govinda. Why Govinda? Because he is the giver of pleasure to the senses. And Madhavendra Puri ends by saying, even if I cannot do it, let me still have that determination to do it. This is the mood of a bhakta. This is the mood that we must learn. We may not be able to do it overnight, but we should aspire to do it. That's the least we can do as devotees. So therefore, man mana bhava mad bhakto. And now the other line is very important. Mad yaji mam namaskuru. That means worship me. If you're thinking of me and you're absorbed in me and you're engaged in my service, then what happens is you will become my devotee. When you become my devotee, then bow your head before me. Prabhupada writes in the purport that a devotee bows his head before Krishna. In today's world it's very hard for people to put their head on the ground. It's very difficult. Even I've seen people coming into the temple to put their head before the Lord is very difficult. But here Krishna says, if you are a devotee, then namaskuru. You will offer obeisances because it is an indication of your humility and your gratitude. Otherwise, very hard. Kamsa could not bow his head. He could not kneel even. Right? Duryodhana refused to bow his head and kneel. But in the end, when his thighs were smashed, he was forced to be on the ground, isn't it? So that's why it's very important, before time smashes us so that we have to bow and we cannot do anything else but we are forced to bow to the ground, better we do it out of love. That is what Krishna is saying. Mam yaji namaskuru. Mad yaji namaskuru. This is very important. Yaji means to worship Krishna. And worshipping Krishna means to worship his form. Look at how fortunate we are in Gauranga Center. We have the form of the Lord. He's so nice to see, isn't he? No matter how much trouble you have, when you stand in front of Jagannath, you feel all your troubles go away because the form of the Lord is absolute. Krishna is here. Jagannath is hearing everything we say. Every thought that we have in Gauranga Center, he's hearing. He knows. You may go downstairs and think, oh, Jagannath is upstairs, it's okay. But he knows. You go into the toilet also and you think, I have such a lousy program. He knows. He knows everything. And by the way, if you leave Gauranga Center and go home also, and then you start finding fault, he knows also. Right? There's nowhere where he doesn't know. He knows. Why? Because of deity worship. And that's why Srila Prabhupada says it is so important to worship Krishna as the deity. And the moment you worship Krishna as the deity, something wonderful happens to us. Look at 6:16:31 of Srimad Bhagavatam. 6:16:31. We'll wind down after this. 6:16:31. Such a beautiful shloka. In that shloka, Maharaj Chitraketu, after very wonderful penance, he finally takes darshan of Krishna. And when he takes darshan of Krishna, see what he says. As soon as Maharaj Chitraketu saw the Supreme Lord, he was cleansed of all material contamination. That's why we perform Madhyaji. And that's why we do Namaskuru. The moment you worship Krishna, the first thing happens is that whatever material contamination is in our hearts, we are cleansed of it. And we become situated in original Krishna consciousness. Then we become completely purified. So all of us at this moment are completely purified. We are cleansed of material contamination. Then something else happens. Then Chitraketu Maharaj became silent and grave. So this is very important how we approach Krishna. Silent means not that we don't say anything, but whatever we speak is about Krishna. Because whatever we think is about Krishna. You know, if you speak something which is nonsense, obviously you're thinking nonsense. Otherwise, why is it coming like that? You cannot say, Prabhu, I'm completely in Krishna Loka, but I'm criticizing someone on the side. It doesn't work that way. Whatever you say is an indication of what you think. Isn't it true? It's very true, right? The face is the index of the mind. It is there. You can see what is happening to us through our face. Therefore, the moment we see Krishna, what happens to us? We become silent. In other words, we only speak about Krishna and we become grave. Grave means dhiraha. We understand the true purpose of life. My Guru Maharaj used to say that if you are not grave about Krishna, you will end up in the grave. Because if we are not grave and serious about Krishna consciousness, then we will suffer repeated birth and death. We will not come out of that cycle. So this point of grave is very important. And therefore, this is the beauty of Krishna consciousness. And see the purport. It's a very short purport, but it's really worth reading it. The word Tad Darshana Dvasta Samasta Kilbishava is very important in this verse. If one, let's read it together. If one regularly sees the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the temple, one will gradually be disinfected of all material desires simply by visiting the temple and seeing the deity. When one is freed from all the results of sinful activities, one will be purified, and with a healthy mind, completely cleansed, he will increasingly make progress in Krishna consciousness. So the next time someone says, Prabhu, how to progress in Krishna consciousness? Just go to the purport. That's it. This whole purport tells us how to progress in Krishna consciousness. That's it. It's very simple. It's there. See how everything that we need is in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam. We don't need to go anywhere else. That's the point. Just bury ourselves in the book and act on it. And the last point here is the last line is Mam Evaishyasi Yuktvaivam Atmanam Matparayanaha. And Prabhupada says the word that we should concentrate on is Yuktaivam. Yuktaivam. Yuktva means that we must actually be connected to Krishna. Prabhupada in the lecture says Yuktva means to be connected to Krishna. And unless we are connected to Krishna, we cannot be happy and we cannot be peaceful. Can you remember which verse tells you this? Which is the famous verse that tells us without... Okay, there is this very important verse that tells us that how can there be happiness without peace? And that only comes when you connect. 6.6. Yes, Prabhu, thank you. 266, isn't it? It's a very important verse actually. Nasti buddhi ayuttasya. Right? Krishna says, those who are not connected with the Supreme, in other words with Him, two things will happen. We will have neither transcendental intelligence, nor will our mind be steady. Manmana bhava bhakta. Your steadiness in mind depends on your connection to Krishna. See the point? The more you're connected to Krishna, the more steady you are. Even in difficulties, even in up, down, the test of your connection to Krishna is actually how steady your mind is. It determines that actually. And if you're connected to Krishna, you will have a steady mind. If you're connected to Krishna, your transcendental intelligence is automatically given. And without these two, Krishna says there's no possibility of peace. And without peace, how can there... without happiness, how can there be peace? Right? This is really a very important verse for us. So that is Yuktaivam. And last point, Atmanam Matparayanaha. Krishna finally ends by saying that actually all of this, if you're completely absorbed in me, this is the word that he uses finally, absorbed in me, then surely is such a nice word. Surely, that means there is no doubt about it. It is definite that you will come back to Krishna. This is a very important point. I want to make one last point that you will find in Prabhupada's purport that is actually not in the verse directly, but Prabhupada is summarizing the 9th chapter a bit. And Prabhupada says, don't find fault with the devotee. It's very important. Why does he say that? Because he says, even if a devotee accidentally falls down, even if a devotee has some bad habit that has come from the past, but don't forget 9.22 of Bhagavad Gita. And that is, if someone is exclusively devoted to Krishna, whatever that he lacks, some good qualities he lacks, Krishna will give. Sometimes we lack some good qualities, but we are devotees. But because we are really devotees, Krishna will help us with those qualities. And for those qualities that we already have, he will protect. So we should be very careful not to judge devotees, not to find fault with devotees. And never think that a devotee who is not perfect cannot be pure. Perfection is material, but purity is always spiritual. There are many great devotees whom we cannot understand, but it doesn't mean that they are not pure and they are not exalted. And we should never be discouraged that why Krishna consciousness, sometimes we start well, sometimes we don't seem to follow, sometimes you're right, sometimes we are not. To end, look at the purport of 331, and that will be a good way for us to end, because we should end on a high note. Always end on a high note. Look at 331. Further down, Prabhu. Just towards the end, the last line, the last sentence. The last sentence is very long. In the beginning of Krishna consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord. But because one is not resentful of this principle and works sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, he will surely be promoted to the stage of pure Krishna consciousness. If this is not transcendental assurance, then I don't know what else is. So be encouraged always in your devotional service. Be happy in your devotional service. No matter what happens in this world, whether times are good, times are bad, Krishna is always our well-wisher. Krishna knows exactly what to do for each one of us. When to be with us, when to guide us, when to take us out of a situation. This is how we must think. Hare Krishna. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai Gaura Premanande. I can take maybe a question before we go on to Arati. Yes, Sudama Prabhu.
Thank you,
The mic is there. Sorry.
Thank you, Prabhu, for that inspirational class. One quick question. In the very beginning of the class, you talked about Parikshit Maharaj and Rishi Shringi and how Parikshit Maharaj did not react to whatever Rishi Shringi told. At the same time, before the war of Mahabharata started, Krishna also told Arjuna that accepting injustice is a greater sin than doing injustice. So there he is asking Arjuna to fight and avenge whatever wrongdoings were done to him. So these two are kind of contradictory, right? So how do we understand at any point of time, how do we act, or what should be our stance? Should we fight injustice, or should we just take it as something coming from the Lord in case of our past actions or whatever that might be? So how should we handle that situation?
Very good question, Guru. The answer is this way. Most important is, whenever in Shastras there appear to be apparent contradictions, look to the context. Krishna wanted Arjuna to become an instrument in his hand because his plan, his transcendental plan, was to ensure that the Kauravas will never become the rulers of the entire world. And therefore, Krishna wanted that Arjuna become Nimitta Matra Bhavya Sabyasachi, become an instrument in his hands. And therefore, to inspire Arjuna in that way, in the Mahabharata and later in the Gita, Krishna advances all the arguments to tell Arjuna that, frankly speaking, the reason why you are not fighting is because of your own weakness. But now I am telling you that you have to fight for my satisfaction. If my satisfaction lies in that the plan is to bring justice to the world, to bring righteousness to the world, and to counter injustice, then you become part of the plan. If Krishna had decided at that point of time that for whatever reason, injustice will have to come into the world because if the world is going into Kali Yuga, for example, then Krishna may have given Arjuna a different instruction, which he didn't use. Which is why when Kali Yuga came, you'll find that Kali Yuga has, in one sense, disturbed the order of things. Because in the age of Kali, quarrel, hypocrisy are rampant. And these are not qualities that Krishna would want to promote. And yet Krishna allowed Kali to come. Because Krishna's plan when Kali came was to advance the beginning and the advent of Srimad Bhagavatam. And that is the panacea for all of us. So, Parikshit Maharaj became an instrument for Krishna. He did. He also became Nimitta Matra Bhavya Sabyasachi. Even though he could have countered Srimati Brahmana, but if he did that, he would have continued to rule the world, but Bhagavatam would not have entered. So Krishna's plan at that point was actually to ensure that Bhagavatam comes. And when Bhagavatam comes, it becomes the torchlight to this world. It is also Krishna's plan that this entire world goes through yugas. And because the living entities have decided to be separate from Krishna, then we will also have to face the consequences of our leaving him. And that's why we have the material world. So therefore, if we were to be guided by when we should fight for justice or when we should do something, that very often comes because we don't understand the plan of the Lord. We're not sure in a particular situation, should I fight for justice, should I not? At that point of time, 1134, the purport says very nicely that actually the plans of the Lord nobody knows. It is stated there. And even Bhishma Dev says, Nahi asya karhichit rajan, puman veda vidit sitam. He says in the first canto, 9th chapter also, sorry, I just threw 2 verses here. You can't do it in two screens, but I'm just saying that, I'm saying that when you look at the 2 verses, both of them are very close to each other because Bhishma Dev says, no one can know the plan of Krishna. 1134 purport says that nobody knows the plan of Krishna. But Prabhupada writes in the purport of 1134. Is it there, Prabhu? The purport of 1134?
Yes.
Okay. So you can see here, every plan is made by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is very important. Krishna makes every plan. But he's so kind and merciful to his devotees that he wants to give credit to his devotees who carry out his plan. So he credits Arjuna. He credits Parikshit Maharaj. Life should therefore move in such a way that everyone acts in Krishna consciousness and understands the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the medium of a spiritual master. Now why Prabhupada says spiritual master is because of the last line. The plans, the second verse, the plans of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are understood by His mercy, and the plans of the devotees are as good as His plans. One should follow such plans and be victorious in the struggle for existence. So when in doubt which plan to take, consult our spiritual masters. Consult the senior Vaishnavas. And in that way, through them, the plan becomes revealed to us. That has been the way of Vaishnava culture. Is that helpful, Prabhu? You brought up a very important principle, because there will always be contradictions. I hope this helps. Any other points, Prabhus? Matajis? Yes, Gaurkanti Prabhu. Let's have the mic.
Prabhu, it is said that we should act as per our level and as per our Maryada. So does that imply for praying also should we act as per our level?
A bit louder, Prabhu. We should act as per our level of...
Our level, or the level we are, we should act as per our disposition.
Okay.
Yeah. So does that apply for praying also? Should we pray as per our level that we are? Because
then how else to pray, Prabhu? What would be the alternative if it's not at our
because
level?
sometimes we pray when we are repeating prayers.
Sorry?
When we are repeating certain prayers,
Okay.
those prayers are way beyond our abilities.
They are beyond our abilities.
Yeah. So
Okay.
and if you pray those prayers,
Yes.
I am personally afraid that if those prayers come true, what will happen to me?
I mean, that's a good point, But if you don't have faith that the prayers that are being chanted will actually do you good, then you will worry about the prayers you're chanting.
Sorry.
Correct? If you have faith, for example, if you have a prayer by Kunti Mata, Vipadaha Shantuta Saswat, it's a frightening prayer, isn't it? Where Kunti Mata says, I want more and more calamities to come to me so that I can remember Krishna more. Right? If you feel, Prabhu, that you're scared of the prayer because you don't want all the headaches to come on your head, then Bhagavatam has a lot of other milder prayers also that you can chant. It's alright. Of course, if you get frightened of Vitasu's prayer, Nanaka Krishna, Nacha Parameshwar, but I do want a bit of Dhruvaloka, I do want a bit of earth, then that prayer also you can't chant. You have to find a prayer, I guess, where you're not so scared, but you can jump. So actually it's a matter of pushing yourself. If you have faith that whatever prayer that you put forward as given by Krishna is really good, just like sometimes we think a medicine is going to not help us, but we have faith and the medicine takes us to the next level of recovery, then the medicine has actually helped us. And very often the mind is the barrier to that, you see. Because the mind thinks that Krishna will not give you a strength to actually be able to realize the prayer. But Krishna can give you that strength, Prabhu. For every prayer that you put forward, pray to Krishna, Krishna give me the strength to stand up to the prayer. Maybe that is an additional supplement prayer that you can throw in. I think that will help. But it's a good point. Now you should do some homework. Go and find all the prayers that you are scared of and put them down for the congregation. We'll avoid them. And then you give us the prayers that you think we can all match up to, and we'll try that also. You'll find 90% of the prayers, Prabhu, are tough prayers actually. Very tough prayers. Right? One more, I think someone else was behind. Prabhu, yes, Prabhu. Mahesh Prabhu, yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, in the context of next month's time, so I think you mentioned initially that, devotee should always be just concerned with devotion, not liberation, right?
Devotion and not liberation.
Not liberation.
You're talking about Mahakumbha Mela.
Yeah. So
Okay.
in that context, wanted to check because the whole world is, kind of moving there, and many times we go for these places
Yes.
just to take a dip.
Yeah,
And
we are
so-
taking the dip.
So how should we take this? Should
You
we
know,
really go, not go, kind of?
Yeah. No, if you want to go to the ISKCON stall, distribute books, distribute prasadam, help Gauranga Prabhu cook, and after that, chant Kirtan with Lokanath Maharaj and Sri Krishna Chaitanya Maharaj, and then leave Kumbh Mela. Because that's what Prabhupada did. Prabhupada went for a dip, but you will ask his disciples, they will say, he just dipped. But what he was really interested in is spreading Krishna consciousness. And I'm on the chat with all the temple presidents in India currently, and I'm getting regular updates. And I tell you, all they are doing, our devotees who are in the stall, who are absorbed, they are just spreading Krishna consciousness. Nobody has time to even see the river, Prabhu. They are not even seeing the river. They are just spreading Krishna consciousness. But then I'm also hearing from the chat about devotees who are going there, they are avoiding our stall and they are just camping by the river. Because they hope that they will be liberated. But even if they are liberated, they have to come to our stall for prasadam. So there you go. I hope that helps, Prabhu. It's time for devotees to step up. It's time to follow Srila Prabhupada very carefully. And that means we become very strict about how we view these things. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. Anybody else? All fine? Very nice. Yes, Ramamai Prabhu. Share, please share. The mic is there, sorry. Then we will stand up for Gaurarati.
Thank you, Prabhu. So this is not a question. You mentioned about how Rakshasa is coming and everybody who is supporting and cooperating with it has to benefit. So I recently came across something in Prabhupada's purport. This is in 4:21:26.
4:21:26 purport.
And in the purport, Prabhupada says, since the Krishna consciousness movement going on at the present moment is genuine, perfect and authorized and is following in the footsteps of Prithu Maharaj, anyone who cooperates with this movement or accepts its principles will get the same result as the workers who are actively propagating Krishna consciousness.
Jai.
I thought that was very relevant to point that you made.
It's a wonderful way for us to end today. Thank you, Prabhu. And thank you all for coming together today to hear Bhagavatam. Our prayers go to Smriti Radha Mataji. For those of us who know her, she's in a very precarious situation. But can I just inform the devotees here that please, from a Sastric point of view, rest assured that Mataji is protected. Her consciousness is protected and Krishna is fully in control. So whatever Krishna wants is what we want. We must become aligned with Krishna. And we must have full faith that any one of us who is in difficulty or challenge, let us have faith that Krishna is our supreme abode of shelter, and he is always our well-wisher. That is very important. Nothing. While we are thinking and worrying so much, Mataji is so powerful as an individual and devotee that she has engaged all of us in remembering Krishna. And I want to thank all the devotees who have been taking time and trouble to go over, chant, to be especially on the Zoom chanting. That's been amazing. Mataji, you started it. All glories to your service, and I hope everybody else can do that. But now the time is there for us to leave it at the lotus feet of Krishna, because Krishna knows what is best. And we will pray and we will chant. Their family is here, right? So all our hearts and all our prayers go to the family and go to Tulsi Charan, and it is also with Radha. Radha, are you here? She's upstairs, huh? That's good. So let's chant, and now we pray, right, for the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to have a good Rath Yatra, to take care of Mataji, and to take care of all our consciousness. Sometimes my Guru Maharaj used to say, you're worried so much about somebody, but you have forgotten how much degraded you are in your consciousness. So you have to pick up your own consciousness too. That's also very important. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki.
HG Devakinandan Prabhuji ki.
Jai.